I mean, you start small, but you have to start.
Right.
You have to start, create a relationship when you don't want anything. That's the best time to create it. Then when you do have an issue, if you've got that relationship, then they think of you as enough of a friend and or constituent that they're interested to hear what you have to say.
Hello, everyone. Welcome out to another episode of the PMP Industry Insider Podcast, where we take a look at what is changing in the pest and lawn industries, and we take you to the front lines to those who are driving those changes. I'm Donnie Shelton, owner of Triangle Home Services, which has Triangle Pest and Triangle Lawn. And with me is a man who needs no introduction, nor does he need a back brace, Mr. Dan Gord. Dan, would you like to say good morning, explain a little bit about our topic, our fine guest, and maybe give our sponsors a little love?
Absolutely. Good morning, Dan Gordon, PCO bookkeepers, M&A specialists. We do back office bookkeeping, CFO work, and exit planning services for the pest and lawn industry. And before I talk about any of that stuff, let's talk about our guest. Our guest is Rick Bell, technical and compliance business coach with Sherry Spencer and Laura Corbin at Pest Control Business Coach. And the topic, why getting involved in regulatory issues matters. And before we get into our topic and introduce Rick, let's talk about our sponsors. First one is Coalmarch. They are your partner in fueling growth for pest and lawn pros. They help you scale smarter. Podcast listeners get the first month free at coalmarch.com/podcast. For more than 40 years, PestSure has been protecting pest control companies with specialized insurance safety programs because nobody understands our industry better. Learn more at pestsure.com. And then for our high-tech fans, we have Voice for Pest, who delivers the only phone solution designed specifically for pest and lawn care professionals, from powerful AI features to deep integrations with most of the industry CRMs. Discover why leading companies rely on it. Visit them at voiceforpest.com/podcasts. And for your chemical and mechanical trap and other supply needs, there is Forshaw, who is a leading family-owned and operated distributor, serving pest management professionals since 1961. They focus on people, partners, and performance, and they have a really cool inventory management system called Foresight, and they're some really fun people. We always enjoy hanging out with them, and you can visit them at forshaw.com. And last but not least, the PMP Industry Insider peer groups. If you are not a member, you need to be. And we've probably got about 60, 65 members now. And our groups are led by David Billingsley, industry veteran. And if you want to hear firsthand of what being a member feels like, you can go back to episode 238 with Caleb Cunningham. And let's get started. So welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say before we get going,
yeah, go ahead.
Rick, super glad to have you on the podcast. I have to say for our listeners, if you don't know Rick, you probably should get to know him. I have a lot of gratitude for this guy and for this guest. He certainly helped me early on in the industry, as I know he has helped many other companies. And so just glad to have you here, Rick. Good to connect back with you. Grateful to have you here on the podcast. And I think our topic today is quite appropriate. So let's talk about kind of what you're up to these days. I know last time we had you on, you were actually with Arrow. And so that means it's been a while. maybe give us an update on like what you're up to these days and kind of what's going on and how you're spending your days now.
Well, thank you, Donnie. Thank you, Dan, for having me. Kind of a strange story. I started a small consulting business and just kind of puttering around doing mostly free work for myself and friends of mine. And Sherry and her husband, Ray, are good friends. We see them quite a bit because we actually live about 5 miles apart. But I've known Sherry forever. I actually called on her dad back in the early 80s when He was in North Carolina and South Carolina with Eford Services and then progressed from there. But known her a really long time and was keeping up with her pest control business work. And we were out to dinner one night. We were talking about 1,000 things. And then she just kind of looked at me and goes, you know what? We need to do this together. I was like, you know what? Yeah, we could do this together. So I became her technical and compliance coach. And, we're walking before we run based on my limited knowledge of the various software features that Sherry and Laura use. So I'm enjoying it, though, having a good time and talking about things that are important to me, obviously with regulatory and compliance type issues. So it's
Yeah.
good and it's exciting to be with two fast moving ladies like this because they are definitely keeping it busy.
Yeah, no, we had them on just recently on the podcast. We talked a bit about that. We talked a bit about kind of what they're doing. Can you just walk through a little bit about your background and your experience with regulatory affairs? Because I say, back when I first got to know you, Rick, you were the technical director, I believe, for Arrow, and then of
Yeah.
course you kind of moved on and started doing regulatory stuff after that. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that and what it means to be, or explain it, what a VP of government affairs or government affairs does?
Still being decided in many quarters, I think.
Right.
Well,
Depends on who
if
you
it's
ask.
representative of our government, it's not a lot.
Yeah, I think with our new administration, we kind of knocked it in neutral as far as onerous regulations go. But
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, a little bit of background. I worked in the corporate office as VP of Tech Services, and I was called over to the conference room by Emily, and walked in the conference room, and Emily and Joe were sitting in there, and I closed the door, and I thought, okay,
This is it.
what's this one? And we had a good conversation, and they asked me if I would be Vice President of Government Affairs. And I said, yeah, absolutely. And I walked out of that room thinking, okay, what now? I don't recall a reference book for that, but I called on three very dear friends, Norman Goldenberg, Bob Rosenberg, and Tom Dietrich. And I basically said, okay, I think this is what you guys do. When I see you at meetings, you're always off doing something else. But, I had a great conversation with all of them, got some tips, and met with Tom Dietrich. And Tom actually had prepared a legal page for me with names and telephone numbers, contact information, and numerous associations throughout the United States. He said, meet these people, get to know them, go to their meetings. He said, that's what you need to do. So I've actually still got that paper in my office that Tom wrote for me over probably about 25 years ago.
Wow.
But it was a
Wow.
pretty good how-to list. And as you mentioned, Donnie, I came in as VP of Tech Services. So I had a lot of meetings, conversations, and hearings, frankly, with in all the states where we operate with regulators. So had had pretty good relationships with these folks because we'd worked through some difficult issues together, and
Hmm.
it allowed me to get to know these people before I I got into the regulatory situation with Arrow. So worked out pretty good in that respect.
So that dream team that you talked about, and I know all those guys or knew all those guys as well, and that is cool for a big company to be able to afford a guy like you or a guy who is a regulatory affairs person. What does it mean to the smaller company, and what could they do to help or to learn more about, to understand the importance of all this, especially as we're coming on Legislative Day, which is
Yeah.
one of my favorite events. What tell us some of that.
Dan, honestly, and I still hear this today that I'll talk to guys about, are you aware of this particular bill that was dropped in the House or a rule change coming up in South Carolina or Georgia, Florida, wherever? And I hear it way too much. Rick, you just don't understand. I got to run a route. I've got to run the office. I've got
Mm,
to maintain these two employees I have. I don't have time for that stuff. And besides, you big companies, you guys have people like you that can do this. So, I figure you're going to represent the industry and, you know, you guys keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate it, but I just don't have time to do it.
And what,
And I,
so,
I try to start small. Just look, do me a favor, join your state association, or if you're already a member, be a little bit more of a presence. Come to some meetings, volunteer to do a couple of things. Survey your customer base, talk to your technicians. Maybe you're treating a senator or a representative's house right now and you just don't really know it and haven't created that relationship.
yeah.
It really happens a lot. And
Hmm.
I mean, you start small and but you have to start.
Mhm.
You
Right.
have to start and create a relationship when you don't want anything. That's the best time to create it. Then when you do have an issue, and it could be something great or it could be something terrible, but if you've got that relationship, then they think of you as enough of a friend and or constituent, which is extremely important, that they're interested to hear what you have to say.
And Rick, would you say that, I mean, one of the things I've thought about as a smaller company is who would they listen to? Oftentimes if you're coming from a massive corporation or there's a lobbyist versus in their mind, this is someone who's really in the community, someone who is boots on the ground. I mean, do you see that as being kind of a way that like a legislator may be more likely to listen to you as a smaller company more so than someone who has their own, VP of government affairs? I mean, do you feel like that plays a factor in why a smaller company should get involved or?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, you're a voter and you're a constituent. You may be a booster or donate to their campaign later down the road, but most of these guys don't really know what pest control people do for a living. They don't know what
Hmm.
our good points are. They don't know we protect people's homes and their environment. And unfortunately, most of the story with pest control out in the world is somebody misuses a pesticide,
Mhm.
and
Right.
that makes 6 o'clock news. But honestly, if you create some relationships with some of these guys, then they understand that you know, hey, that may be a bad story. This might have happened, but I know what those guys do out there day in and day out, and they're taking care of people's families, and they've got a story to tell. And
Sure.
frankly, a lot of that is on us because you guys have been around the industry a long time. Some people are willing to talk to you about what they do, others really not so much. And that, fortunately, that's going away, but there's still some people out there that would prefer not to engage because they may not have what they feel like is enough knowledge to engage in that conversation about a pesticide regulation or the effects of a pesticide on a particular non-target species. I mean, it just, we can stumble over a lot of stuff we do if we go down the wrong tangent on a particular discussion.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I can think of years ago I was heavily involved in our state association, and I remember, and not to I need to find some wood to knock on here, but back in the day, we had this whole issue of service tax, and in the North Carolina legislature, and they did pass a service tax actually, but we were able to successfully advocate to exclude pest control services from that tax, mainly because of the relationships that were there. I'm sure you're probably aware, Rick, we have a lot of folks in North Carolina who are actively involved in building relationships, and we were able to leverage those, that when it got down to be a vote, our industry was actually excluded from the list of services that were taxed. I'm curious, based on your experience at Arrow, any examples where early involvement in a regulatory or compliance issue kind of helped strengthen not only your business, but maybe even the industry that you can think of?
Uh,
Anything come to mind?
no doubt about it, Donnie. And actually, you'll recall you mentioned I'd done a podcast with you before on spray polyurethane foam.
Yeah.
And the relationships that we were able to put together, the stakeholder group, because of previous friendships with, we had, excuse me, just had a lost train of thought, Georgia Pest Control Association, the Georgia Department of Agriculture, Georgia Pest Control Association, the Georgia Realtors Association, the Home Builders of Georgia, and the Structural Pest Control Commission. We were able to quickly put together a stakeholder group so that we could, situation we had in Georgia is like most other states. The spray foam manufacturers and the spray foam installers and they all got together and they were advertising online and on TV about how great spray foam was. But it was totally, in some ways, misleading the customer about what they could do to their termite coverage. And the claims that they make as far as energy savings are spot on. There's no doubt about it. It's a great product. But if you apply spray foam 100% in the crawl space, you've created an igloo basically that we can't inspect. And if we can't inspect it, then we can't warranty the house.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can't warranty the house, when it comes time for you to sell it, nobody's going to be able to do a wood infestation inspection report. So it was pretty easy to draw the realtors and builders into that conversation. And we were able to do that effectively.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I remember that. And I remember you did a presentation at the North Carolina Pest Management Association. Yeah. I was just amazed at not only how much went into that, but how much was at stake. And so no, I remember that explicitly. Can you tell us what are some, like, when you think about misconceptions and folks who are in industry when it comes to compliance and regulation, like, a lot of times what I see is the smaller companies, like you said, leave it to the larger companies and don't realize that it has a big impact on them as well. Can you just kind of walk through some of those common misconceptions that you see and why, if you're a smaller company and you're considering this, that you absolutely should be involved in some way, shape, or form in the legislative process?
Absolutely. And I would take it one step before the legislative process and call it get to know your regulators. These are the guys that are coming out to your office, their inspectors are, and it's an extremely important part of the puzzle. And it may be uncomfortable for a lot of guys because just because I know how to kill German cockroaches doesn't mean I know how to talk to you about a rule change and or a violation of the rule in my paperwork, because I'm perceiving that this is not important enough to hire an attorney to look at. I can find an old triangle or an arrow or an Orkin contract, wherever it says Rollins or Arrow, I'll just scratch it out and put in Jim's Pest Control, and I'll use their paperwork. But no, the relationships you can create with your regulators, you can establish credibility with these guys. And, frankly, it could be something as simple as, hey, Rick, I've got a lady that has probably called me 10 times about your Lawrenceville Service Center, and I need some help with this lady. It's basically kind of like, I need somebody to get her to stop calling me. So, it might involve some extra service. It might involve having to change a couple of your forms to get in compliance. But, you create that relationship, and I always love the opportunity to speak to inspectors, just to let them know, hey, you know what? I've been in this industry for 25, 30 years. I started as a distributor's rep. I've owned my own pest control company. I've been in an awful lot of crawl spaces. I know what you're going through. I know what we need to be doing. And I'm not going to tell you we always do it right, but we're always going to fix it. So take advantage of that relationship. But you got to create it. You got to be willing to go out of your comfort zone and create it.
So let me
I
ask you a question.
before we move on, though,
Go
Dan,
ahead.
because I want to reiterate what Rick just said, because it is so very important. When I first got in the industry, I was an outsider. I didn't know a lot about pest control. My very first stop was as an owner. I was being trained by the guy that I just bought the company from, and truly the first probably 3 to 4 years, I viewed our inspectors as a PETA, right? And the first part of that is paying in, and then the is the next word, and I'll let you figure out the last part there. But I really did, because they would come in and they would be like, these small little things, and we were trying. I mean, we were obviously trying to do the best thing for the customer, but and I would deal with the egos and stuff like that. And as I've gotten older, I cannot tell you how much gratitude and appreciation I have for those folks, because they do protect our industry. The fact that we're regulated, and the fact that, not, Johnny can just say, "Hey, I bought some pesticide and I'm starting a company now." The fact that he can't do that is a big deal to our industry. And what it does, these regulators really protect not only the consumers, but they also protect the industry in general. Dan, you and I just did this episode about what happened in Florida. The regulators were very much involved in that. And I know I mentioned this on that, but I mean, we just don't, back to Rick's point, we have to form alliances and relationships, because at the end of the day, I mean, we benefit and they benefit. And so don't take that relationship for granted, because I can tell you right now, deregulation for our industry would be catastrophic, both for the consumer and for a lot of good operators. So sorry, Dan, I
Well,
had to go on a monologue there.
That's
and we've seen that in West Virginia and in Indiana, and it's not a good thing. And real quick, I'll get this. I think it's important to say this. A lot of people in this industry are grandsons of people that started pest control companies, or granddaughters, or sons of the owner, and the relationships with regulators has not always been good.
Mhm.
Um, I truly think those days are over, and regulators are more about compliance assistance than they are in fines and putting people out of business. That whole relationship has changed. And if you reach out to them, you can make friends with these people. They
Right.
can come speak at your meeting. They will help you do your branch inspections, and you can do the same with them. I mean, it's a beneficial relationship all the way around.
Yeah.
So, Rick, we're coming up on legislative day for NPMA, which is a national or federal government. That those are some of the rules that we want to look at. I mean, and if you want to know how powerful we are, just look back to COVID and how we became an essential service. That was massive.
I remember it
That
well.
catapulted the industry. When everybody was shut down, our industry was really very, very healthy. But how, how does it work on the state level, right? So national is very organized. They have their legislative day. Everybody goes up to the Hill. But have you worked in several states. Um, how does it all work that way?
We've got everything you can imagine, Dan. We've got some states like my home state of Georgia. We're extremely well organized. We've had a legislative committee for probably 50 years. We've had the number one lobbyist firm in the state of Georgia has represented GPCA for 28 years now.
Mm.
And I mean, we call each other all the time, not just during the session. Go to fundraisers with these guys, go to luncheons with these guys. Was on the board of directors of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce with these guys. It's relationships are what you make them, and not every state can afford a lobbyist. I understand that, but you can send somebody down to the Capitol every once in a while and just look at the. It's a website called Legiscan, excuse me, And you can see issues that are coming up that may or may not impact your industry. Quick example: 2 years ago, there was a bill that came up that was it was being carried by one of the representatives from Decatur, Georgia. And I was reading some of the first calls of the bills, and this had to do with creating time limits on when you can and can't use leaf blowers. And I looked at that and I thought,
Very
whoa,
familiar with that rule.
yeah,
And you
yeah.
could,
Yeah.
Nobody out there in the world knows the difference between a leaf blower and a mister blower.
Mhm.
So what the city of Decatur attempted to do was to not allow using leaf blowers before 10 a.m. and after 3 p.m. I thought to myself, wonder what that would do to the mosquito industry.
Mhm.
Obviously, if you're crammed into that 5 hour window, it's not going to do you very good in making your production stops every day. So, got in touch with a couple of senators, talked through that, found out that there were a couple of related industries in Georgia, the Urban Ag Council and the green industry in the state of Georgia were already lined up against it and had hired a lobbyist who I knew through the Georgia Chamber, and we worked together on this thing and were able to defeat it. I've heard noise of that, literally and figuratively, of coming back in some other states, but it's just kind of some of these things that you become an unintended consequence.
Mhm.
And Donnie, you mentioned earlier about the sales tax in North Carolina, and you're able to negotiate your way not to be covered by that. And we did the same thing here as a regulated industry. Then we are already covered under the Georgia Department of Ag. So the legislature doesn't need to pass another bill that would affect an industry like ours because we're already regulated.
So Rick, did you
Right.
have, obviously you did it under the banner of Georgia Pest Management Association, but did you have smaller company members working with you? So, like what you're talking about seems pretty intimidating for a small owner. Like, how do I get involved if I'm a 3, 4 person company? Did you work with many of them, and how does the process work for somebody to get involved?
Not as many as I would love to say, but
Right.
quite a few owners. You've got to have a bit of an ego if you're going to be a business owner anyway.
Mhm.
So they wanted to participate, they wanted to be there. And I frequently tell newer visitors to Legislative Day in DC, look, just come watch what we do, watch how we do it, watch what topics we discuss, what topics we don't discuss. And, don't talk about your grandmother in South Georgia. That's not why we're here. We don't want to get off track with this thing. We've got probably, if we're lucky, 15 minutes
Right.
of quality time, maybe with a legislator, but probably with their chief of staff or the chairman of their ag committee, which is great. It's not a slam. It's not derogatory at all. The politician's going to come in there and get the picture and shake everybody's hand, but it's the chief of staff or the committee chairman that is going to do the heavy lifting on this issue. So, just go in, get comfortable, listen to what experienced people are talking about and how they're doing it. Next year, have at it, but it's just walk before you run, sort of thing, and get
Sure.
comfortable with the whole situation.
Yeah. We're getting close to the end here, but before we do that, I want to spend a little bit of time on regulatory trends or issues that you think pest control leaders should be paying attention to now, and not only what those issues are, but how they can get involved to make it a favorable outcome for both them and the
And
industry.
not just pesticide
Yeah.
regulation, anything that affects our business.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there are quite a few things that we're front and center in right now. Um, I will say this. So I mentioned the change in administration, and the new administrator at the EPA is former Congressman in New York, Lee Zeldin. Lee is an unabashed business first guy. A lot of initiatives that EPA was working on in the previous administration, they're not working on them anymore. I mean, and you saw probably 2 weeks ago that the greenhouse gas initiative is basically gone. And that's going to wash over into our industry quite a bit. Clean Water Act is always something that we're going to have to keep our eyes on, as well as the Endangered Species Act. Anything can be thrown in that bucket because all it has to do is may affect the environment of that particular species. And that's a pretty broad brush. But to narrow down a few things in this, number one is the certification and training rule that was put into effect by EPA in 2017. It was still being reworked in 2023. I think it's probably going to be reworked just a little bit more. The same with the rodenticide issue. That was going pretty quickly for the pest management industry. With the change in administration, it would not surprise me for nothing tangible to happen until 2027. And that's if then. So what we're seeing with rodenticides is some states are choosing to act on that. South Carolina acted last year on that to restrict the sale of rodenticides. Connecticut is working on this. Washington State, Massachusetts, Colorado has just put a big bill out there that is going to affect our industry. And I would say these are the primary issues that are big things right now. But I literally think it's going to be a while before anything concrete comes out of those issues, because these are rough numbers, but consumers spent billions on pesticides last year. The professional pest management industry spent millions.
Right.
And, the story there is pretty obvious. I'm not going to state it out loud, but we've got a huge group over here that's buying a lot of these products, and a smaller group over here that is not buying anywhere near the amount of products they are. So it creates a little bit of chaos in which horse are you going to pick and who are you going to bet on.
Right. For sure. For sure. Well, I mean, Dan, any closing thoughts here before we finish out? Because it's, for me, Rick, listen, this has been fantastic. And I think it's truly a case where no matter where you're at, as far as your business is concerned, as far as size, it doesn't really matter. The idea here is make the relationships, have a voice, make sure that there's always, because listen, if there's one thing I know is, and I'm trying to figure out a best way of saying this, the counter opinion is well funded. And they are going to get the airtime. And with, we may not be able to compete with the dollars as far as, but we want to be someone that they can call and give them good information, because if we're not, there's only one side of the story. And that's going to be very negative for our industry. But Dan, any parting thoughts before we finish out here?
No, I think that this is really interesting. I know that the industry has provided me and my family a fantastic living. And the idea is to support it any way that you can. And even if you step out of your comfort zone, because I remember going to the first legislative day, I had no idea what it was about. Now, I've gone for many, many years, and it's very interesting. So you should definitely make it a part of your travel schedule and see how it's done.
I totally agree. And if I can leave you with this last thought here, you remember the pollinator issue?
Mm-hmm.
12, 13 years ago. I mean, that tore at everybody's heartstrings. And one thing I learned very quickly in discussing pollinators with people is you cannot use logic to argue against emotion.
That's a life principle there.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. But it was just amazing. I guess it's kind of like the political environment we're in now. You either are this or you're that. There is no middle ground. And if you feel that way, I've got no time to waste on you. Yeah. And pollinators is a lot that way. It really was.
Oh my gosh, that's so true. When my kids were younger, especially my boys, I used to tell them when they'd get all emotional, I'm like, so right now crazy's out. I'm like, when crazy goes away, then we can talk, but I don't talk to crazy. Right. They're older now.
You don't make it in what you're doing with that philosophy, you could be a marriage counselor. So,
There's no doubt. Rick, listen, I want to give a little bit of airtime here. If people want to reach out to you and they got questions concerning regulatory issues, or they want help from you or whatever, how should they go about getting in touch with you? What's the process? Can you just walk through that a little bit real quick, and then we'll finish out?
Absolutely. Got two email addresses: Rick at Pest Control Business Coach and rbell3877 at Gmail. And by all means, I've noticed one thing now that I've retired and started a couple of smaller businesses is you probably experienced this back in the day, is you do a lot of free work because people just call you up and go, "Hey, I know you're retired, so I wanted to ask you a few things." It's kind of like, yeah, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. No,
but it's this has been 30 years of my life, and I'm deeply interested in it on any level, whether for pay or free. So by all means, give me a call. I love talking about it.
Love it. Love it. Love it.
Good.
Rick, really appreciate you coming on, and we absolutely will post up. Just a reminder, all the resources and topics that we talked about are going to be available on the podcast website. Just take a look at PMPindustryinsider.com. Take a look under show notes. For this show, we will post Rick's info as well as a summary of this podcast. And as always, we appreciate any ratings and reviews, so long as they're positive. If they were negative, we ask that you give those to Dan because he really appreciates all the negativity. And with that, we're going to sign out. We'll see you all next time. Take care now.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.